In many ways, the MazdaSpeed3 is a survivor of the sport compact era. It's dominated the front-wheel drive segment for so long now that everyone else has pretty much given up trying. Until now.
After years of teasing us with high-powered Focus models in Europe, Ford has finally brought over this, the turbocharged Focus ST.
Powering the MazdaSpeed3 is a 2.3-liter turbocharged four-cylinder engine, making 263 horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque. It sends power to the front wheels through a 6-speed manual gearbox and tips the scales at 3,281 pounds, just 58 pounds heavier than the ST. The Speed 3 is rated at 18 miles per gallon in the city and 25 miles per gallon on the highway and starts at $24,995.
Powering the Focus ST is a 2-liter turbocharged four-cylinder engine that produces 252 horsepower and 270 pound-feet of torque. It too sends power to the front wheels through a 6-speed manual transmission. Fuel economy is rated much higher in the Focus ST at 23 mile per gallon city and 32 mile per gallon highway. The Focus ST begins at a price of $24,495, although our vehicle was fully loaded.
I know its design is a little controversial, but to me, this is what a hot hatch should look like. It's angry and aggressive. Sure, it's got a bit of a goofy grin, but that's just because it's happy about being pissed off. It lets you know it's turbocharged with its big hood scoop, and there's also those contrasting dark 18-inch wheels.
On the outside, there are a few main differences between a regular Focus and the ST. There's a larger front grille and a revised lower front fascia. As well, there's a revised rear bumper, unique 18-inch wheels, and what Ford calls a central dual-pipe exhaust tip. The overall look of the ST isn't as aggressive as the MazdaSpeed3, but still stands out from the crowd of regular hatchbacks. The Focus ST feels more powerful than its claimed horsepower rating, and actually in a straight line feels faster than the Mazda, even though it gives up both power and torque. We have a feeling it may be underrated.
Back in my old friend here, the MazdaSpeed3. She's a bit of a hooligan. Lots of torque and lots of torque steer to go with it. But it is a lot of fun when the boost hits, which is right about now. Runs out of steam pretty quickly though, over 6,000 RPM, which makes for a fairly narrow power band compared to the Focus ST. Here in the Mazda, you've got to be a little bit more aware of where you are in the RPM range and choose your shifts a little bit more strategically.
The Focus ST is far more balanced than the MazdaSpeed3. Whereas the Mazda wants to understeer, the Focus will actually oversteer, which is unusual for a front-wheel drive car. All this leads to a car that feels far more lively than the Mazda. Thanks to a smaller steering wheel and wider front tires, the Focus has a better turn-in feel and just generally has better grip when entering a corner.
I guess the most noticeable characteristic in the MazdaSpeed3 is understeer, and quite a bit of it. Against the Focus ST, which is just so willing to rotate. By contrast, the Speed3 just wants to understeer everywhere. And so you tend to be scrubbing off speed with the front tires everywhere, sliding offline. That's really the fight you have to fight in this car.
The brakes on the Focus don't feel as strong as they do on the Speed3. However, the modulation is much better, whereas the Mazda feels like it's sort of a wooden pedal you're hitting.
There's really two main highlights for me here in the MazdaSpeed. The first being its dampers. This car actually has very impressive shock absorbers. It soaks up the curves really well, especially for a car in its price range. And it also controls body roll exceptionally well. The other highlight for me in the MazdaSpeed3 really is its mechanical limited slip differential. It puts the power down in a very predictable way. You always know how it's going to behave when you get on the power coming out of a corner. Where in the Focus ST, I definitely felt like the electronic diff that it has was cutting in and out on me in certain places.
The electronically controlled differential in the ST does work, but the downside is it really wears on your brakes, and after a couple of hard laps, you'll see your brakes are actually smoking when you leave the track.
There is still a lot I like about the MazdaSpeed3. You know, it's got a lot of personality. It kind of screams of that bygone era of sport compact cars, which were a little rough around the edges. You know, the boost hits hard and then it goes away, but it challenges you. You know, you've got to work this car hard to make it turn a quick lap, and it's just got a personality that matches that big grinning face.
An option that must be selected in the Focus ST are these excellent Recaro seats. They really just hug you in and offer excellent support in the corners. The steering wheel in this car is also excellent. It is small and provides a lot of thick grip right where your hand should be. And of course, this vehicle has My Ford Touch, which still sucks. But in a vehicle like this, why play with the radio when you can play with the throttle?
So I'm sitting here in my angry little friend, the MazdaSpeed3, and although the seats don't look as cool as the Focus seats, I do actually find them more comfortable for my generous American proportions. As far as from the driver's seat goes, I do really like the way Mazda's laid out this car. The pedals are spaced perfectly for heel and toe downshifts, and the steering wheel's a nice size. The shift knob falls to hand perfectly. It just feels like a driver's car. Although I find Mazda's usually a leader as far as interior design and quality goes, the Focus ST actually does have a more progressive, more modern looking interior. Some of the plastics in here are starting to look a little bit dated, but overall it's still a very pleasant place to be.
The Ford Focus ST isn't just more fun to drive, but it has superior driving dynamics as well. The interior also gets top marks, but there are a few drawbacks. It has anonymous styling, and My Ford Touch drives me crazy.
In comparison, the electronic diff in the Focus just isn't as direct as the mechanical diff in the MazdaSpeed3, plus I just love the Mazda's hooligan spirit.
All good points, but was it faster?
Well, not quite. The MazdaSpeed3 managed a best time of a 1:26.0, and the Focus ST pulled off a best of a 1:24.5.
And you can't argue with results.